on this channel. All right. Now you guys can see my face. Hello, good morning. It's Saturday at 8 a.m. Pacific time, 11 Eastern. That means it's Cafe BTW, a gaming morning coffee podcast. I'm your host, Andy, aka Love Retro BTW across all socials, except for YouTube and TikTok. I'm Cafe BTW there. It's good to see everyone. It's nice to see chatters in chat. Here I am in all my glory, still pushing hard. I know it's hasn't been as consistent as I'd like to be with Cafe BTW, but what I like to say is even though the podcast isn't on every Saturday, we are still here. We are still a shop. We still open this baby up, and we're open today. And I have an exciting episode. It's just me. Donkey Kong is not my guest, although he looks like he's stuck in time below. But I am so stoked to be back. This is going to be fun because, I have guests for the most part, but there's episodes where it's just me and we walk through some interesting topics. Today, I really wanted to dive into a retrospective look back at what was it like renting movies and video games. And we're going to do a little bit of a history on the history of renting movies and how renting even started. I did a little research here. So I just want to say thanks everyone. I see a lot of old friends in chat, familiar friends. We are in a new year. I just want to let you know I have a brand new computer. This thing works great. My old computer was like falling apart. I'm stoked because it's been a while, and I want to say something that, mental health is a big issue for a lot of people, and there's a lot of things you could do to keep your mental health strong. And I got to say that the podcast, doing it every Saturday, has always kept me really happy, in tune, and creatively, just feel creatively involved, So it feels good just in general to be back on my podcast. I'm excited just to see people in chat. So just want to let you know it's a new year. We've had 2022 was an interesting year. I felt like movies made a comeback a little bit. We had some decent games that came out. But let's dive into a couple of just dirty laundry, I guess I would call it. Obviously, it's funny. We did this podcast for nearly 3 years, and I didn't have a YouTube until last year. But if you want to see older episodes, there is my YouTube channel. I'm starting to put VODs up there. We're going to get some new thumbnails and stuff like that. But a lot of the older Cafe BTW episodes with some great guests are still available right at the top of my YouTube. So if you want to check out some older episodes, and if you missed this episode, hello to anyone on VOD that's watching this. I thank you as well. If you happen to be here on Saturday mornings when we're live, the advantage is you get to chat with us and be a part of the show, essentially. Hey, Tao, good to see you. GTE says, I used to rent before buying. Great way to make sure you liked your game before throwing down the cash. Totally, and we'll get into that. But let's talk about a couple of things out in just general world. And I know that Gamers Week podcast, shout out to Ryan, they talked about this, but I wanted to talk about this because I haven't been able to because it's been some time. But I think it was yesterday or a couple days ago, Stadia officially ended the cloud service that they released. And there's a few topics before we get into everything else, because I'd like to talk about a couple of, current events and current topics before we get into the nostalgia and stuff. Google Stadia. I wanted to bring this up because as it failed, and obviously there were some issues with it closing down and screwing over developers and whatnot, I do want to say this. I want to thank Google for putting their foot forward and opening the door to actually pushing out a cloud service that allows someone to not have to buy hardware in order to play AAA games. And I think that what's interesting about Stadia is even though it failed, you have to be the penguin that knocks the door down to open up this technology. And I feel like we are heading in a cloud gaming world. As much as you might not like that, as much as, people might not like that, it's kind of like where the future of gaming is heading. And I know Xbox and Microsoft, they are definitely into cloud, and that is happening. But I want to say that I give Google a lot of credit for really taking the first shot and effort at really trying. And they weren't the first cloud gaming service, that's for sure. But what's interesting is we live in this world where you have to have this like crazy built computer to play AAA games on your PC. You got to buy your Xbox, your PS4. But what Stadia did was your hardware was just a controller, and you could play your AAA games on mobile, on your iPad, on your computer, and on your TV. And I always thought that it was really revolutionary in its own right. And I think everyone thinks about the negative of Stadia, but really it's gonna be in 10 years, we are gonna be playing cloud gaming stuff. Like, I think that, in my opinion, the last physical generation of hardware consoles is coming. We're gonna have one more, in my opinion, one more run of console releases before Xbox and Sony are just gonna say, you know what, screw it. Here's a controller, get up and play. And I know that I had commented on Gamers Week podcast post about this, and someone had mentioned, but what about the people in the rural areas that can't afford internet and stuff? And I know Ryan actually in chat here, he said that, that could be, it could eventually be instituted as a service like internet and stuff like that, where there's funding. But I know that cloud, but I guess as much as it fails and stuff like that, that's just my opinion. I think it's not that. And look, I'm a collector. I love physical things. I'm into tangible games. It doesn't mean I support it right now. I still love the fact that you could buy a console and play, but I think that we're, unfortunately for a lot of people, they don't want to go in this cloud gaming world, but it's kind of, I don't know. I don't want to say it's definitely not going to happen, but it looks like it's going to happen. And I see Nye says, I don't trust big tech. If cloud games, I prefer using my PC. And that's going to stay. I guess, I tried to get this highlight functionality where I could highlight people's messages on my stream, but that didn't work out. But anyway, I don't want to go too deep into this, but I think it's interesting that they just closed down the service recently. But I want to put my 2 cents in, because I think that sometimes you got to be the penguin and you got to be that technology, regardless if you like it or not. They knocked the door down. They said, screw it. We're going to bring cloud gaming to the masses, way ahead of cloud gaming really being a mainstream thing. So as much as you hate it, you like it, you don't like it, they did break down the door. They did attempt to do this technology, and it was working. And it's unfortunate, all the developers that had games ready to release on Stadia. I do feel bad for all them, all the hard work that a lot of people put into Stadia. And obviously we saw major layoffs recently. I think Google laid off 12,000 people yesterday, which is horrible. But Retro Gamer says, the future is coming because the kids don't care about physical games like our generation downloaded MP3s for music. It's over for physical. Absolutely, guys. As much as I'm 41 years old, right? I grew up with the tangible era of video games. That was my life. Being able to run to Toys R Us with my dad, buy a new game, drive all the way back home, open the box and put the cartridge in. Those days are long gone. Like Retro Game Brew says, it doesn't matter what our generation thinks. It's really the younger generation that dictates where this technology is really going to go. And I'll be honest, a lot of kids and young generation children, they don't even care about cars anymore. They don't even want a car. They just Uber everywhere. I don't blame them. I mean, that's kind of where we're going. Hey, Reliving, good to see you. Anyway, don't want to make this the topic of the show, but did want to talk about and give my 2 cents. Now, something I'm really sad about is VR related. Now, during the pandemic in March, I literally bought a VR helmet because I was losing my mind. I'm very, as you know, if you've ever met me in person, I'm very, I like networking. I like meeting people. I like connecting. And during the pandemic, I was like locked away and I couldn't meet people. So I got VR and I started attempting to visit and check out social spaces. And I'm really sad to hear that Microsoft's platform AltSpace VR, which in my opinion is one of the best VR social platforms ever, has been closed down and they're ending it. And it's super sad because there's more than this whole Altspace VR being a social network, we actually had the community manager on the show years ago, like 2.5 years ago. We had the community manager of Altspace VR on, and he was talking about community and stuff like that. Um, I Hey Biff, what's up? I am so sad to see Altspace go because, and some people in chat might have visited. I used to run in a VR space event every Friday night called Video Game Chat, and we would basically run it like an open mic, and I would get on stage. I would usually do like some sort of introduction to like a topic, and then we would open up the floor and people would come up and just talk about anything video game related, and you would wait in line and come up on stage in VR, and you could see this is me in VR with all these wonderful people that I met over the course of using Altspace VR. And it really hurts my heart that this awesome service that I use to connect with people and people that love gaming is being shut down. And this is just proof in the pudding that I had all these awesome people. Then we used to run the show every Friday night. It was awesome. And I'm going to miss it. Mikey, I'll read your topic real quick. The market and consumers are not ready for fully digital experience. If anything proves that they're not ready for it, Stadia is a perfect example. Oh yeah, Mikey, I agree with them not being ready for it, but I said they're the penguin. They're knocking down a very early technology. That said, I am so pissed. And Biff can attest, he actually attended my live video game chat event that I used to hold in VR and every Friday. So I want to send a big thank you to the Altspace community. Altspace VR was one of the best social spaces. It was safe. It wasn't like VR chat and had all the trolls and spam. They actually cared about this community, and I'm really sad to see Altspace VR go away. So I'm just sending out my love to the developers that supported Altspace VR and all the awesome people that created events and music and all this cool stuff that I experienced in Altspace VR. I got a terrible text message from my friend who used it, and he told me that it was shutting down, and I looked, and yeah, it's gone. But I'm going to miss what I did in that thing, and this is just a perfect photo to explain the fun we had, and look at all these awesome VR people. Anyway. If everything goes digital, there will still be people making custom game cases and display cases. It has no comedy night. That is for sure. It was no comedy night. That's a long story too. Yeah, so I mean, look, back to technology. Stadia failed because the consumers are not ready for it, but the more we push into this digital frontier, the more and more people are going to get comfortable with it. It's just like anything else that releases, and we're going to get into that. Like, before cassette tapes were released, people didn't rent movies. They didn't have the access to it. So we'll see what happens. That said, let's move into our main topic today. The main topic today is taking a look back on the history of video game renting, video movie renting. It's going to be majority more movie renting because renting really, is synonymous with movies and TV shows. And I know if you've ever been a kid like me that grew up before we had Netflix streaming and stuff like that, we would go on a Friday night. One of the best experiences of my life. We'd either go with my family, my mom and dad, or my brother, and we'd go pick out 3 movies. Usually try to get the new release, and we'd always have a backup movie and then like a third movie. Like, what's that third movie? And then you'd be set for the weekend, right? You would have your movies, you'd have 3 movies, maybe sometimes you'd rent more than that, and you'd go home and you'd spend the weekend and you had these 3 movies to watch over the course of that weekend. I loved going to Blockbuster on a Friday night. And then when you would wait in line, they had all the candy aligned and the popcorn and all that stuff to get you excited about watching movies, so you'd end up picking up, I'll grab some M&Ms as well. But it was also synonymous with, renting video games, which we'll get into. But before we could really talk and really walk through our experiences with renting, we got to go back in time and figure out, how did this all start? How did renting movies even begin? And that goes way back. So let me pull up my notes here because I did some research, and I just want to be clear, everyone. Even though we walk through history and nostalgia on this podcast, just know I am no way, shape, and form a historian but I do my research, so I will do my best. But just want to, caveat that I am not a historian, but I do like talking about stuff like this. So let's dive in. Any other messages here? Mike says, I rented more games than movies. I have more memories of game rentals than movie ones. I would say it's reverse for me, but definitely going to talk about video game rentals. Biff says, I don't want to be that guy, but I'm starting a podcast with my friend who owns a video store in Victoria from inside his store. That's great. Biff, keep me posted. Retro Gamer says, going to Blockbuster was an event. It was so cool. It was. So let's, before we could even rent movies, and this is going to relate a lot to technology, because there was a time where humanity didn't have televisions in their homes, that not everyone had a TV. And then times started to change. People could start buying video televisions in their homes, and people could watch live TV. But one thing that's really interesting about this time is that you couldn't really record things when the first TVs came out. When you had to watch TV, you had to make sure that you were watching something live. There was no recording. There was no replays, reruns. None of that existed, because the technology of recording the videos they were shooting wasn't existing yet. But there is very, very kind of like archaic versions of recording systems that started to slowly grow and create how we were even able to ever rent stuff. Because before you could rent movies, the technology of recording live broadcasts or televisions and movies had to be implemented. Now we're going to go back to what's called a kinetoscope. A kinetoscope, and this is footage of what a kinetoscope recording looks like. And what a kinetoscope is really interesting. It was a camera that shot into another lens. So if there was a live stream of a broadcast, they would put this camera in the lens and record the actual live stream. And look how horrible it was. I mean, this is, talk about blurry. This was very early recording, and I think it's fascinating to see what an early kinetoscope recording looked like. I mean, obviously, you could not even make out the faces here. Retro Game Bros says, you and me both love discussing history, but definitely not a historian. Cloud says Betamax rentals were kind of funny because you get the machine when you'd rent a movie. Hey, Al. So the kinetoscope was a really interesting invention, and it was very old and obviously not very good. And there was a famous singer actor named Bing Crosby at the time, and he is this is really interesting. Bing Crosby is a guy that said, I do all these shows, I do all these concerts, I want to figure out how do we record these things. So he actually invested $50,000 into a technology of developing reel-to-reel recorders. A reel-to-reel recorder gave you the ability to record without having like a camera, like a kinetoscope, just shooting into a lens. A reel-to-reel would actually work as like a modern day VCR, where you're actually you're taking a recorded broadcast and then you're recopying it over. So what's really interesting is this old legendary singer actor, Bing Crosby, actually invested money into helping experiment and create a reel-to-reel developed system in order to develop recorded videos. I never knew that Bing was Bing was pretty cool. The fact that he really just decided, hey, so what they ended up coming up with was something called a 2-inch quadruplex videotape recorder. It was the first practical, commercially successful analog recording videotape format. That's a tongue twister, but that is the early essence of how video recording started. And, you're all wondering like, wow, Andy's going deep. But I think that it's important to, before we talk about like our memories, you got to know how there was a history of technology. And that's why kind of talking about Stadia is really interesting, because that's a new technology that wasn't adapted right away. This is something that was finally adapted. But remember, it was commercially adapted because a lot of TV shows and studios wanted to figure out, how do we record stuff that we made? Now, this is really interesting. This is one of the oldest established recordings using a reel-to-reel. It's a Bing Crosby, Dean Martin, Frank Sinatra event. And this is actually a re-recorded recording using reel-to-reel quadruplex system. So what you're seeing here is a very early example of a recorded video. And obviously it's not like the kinetoscope; it's actually decent quality. And as far as I know from my research, this is one of the oldest existing footages that was ever recorded using some kind of recording format. So the quadruplex is that as well. Now, obviously, technology, started to ramp up, and the very earliest example of kind of like getting something on a tape, not a reel-to-reel, but like a tape, was something called the U-matic, and it was 1971. This guy's got it in his hands, and it looks like obviously a VHS tape, but it's not. It's called a U-matic 3/4 video cassette system. So very, very early way to record. Then comes around one thing we all know very well is in 1972, very soon after the U-matic came out, was the 1972 release of the VCR, which is the video cassette recorder, is the early domestic analog recording format designed by Philips. So Philips invented the VCR. Now it's not the VHS, which we'll get into. It's the VCR. A domestic way of buying something and bringing it home. Then, moving up the ladder here, we had something that came out called Cart Vision. And Cart Vision, let's see if I can pull this out. Here we go. Cart Vision was very, very early other example of a video kind of cassette that you could actually bring home and play. It was a pre-recorded media that only lasted 18 months. So you record something, and then after 18 months, it wouldn't last. Like the quality of the actual recording would just dissipate. So it really wasn't and this is some footage of an actual Cart Vision. But you see, it was actually, you would have to buy this huge television, and it had this huge machine on the left side, and you would only be able to watch pre-recorded videos, for a certain amount of time because the cassette would actually deteriorate. So it wasn't very practical. Retro Game Brew Biff says 1971 was the best year ever. Just saying. Retro Game Brew says a year later, Pong hit the market. A very exciting time the 70s were pretty cool for technology. Philips had a lot of formats. Some didn't pan out, like the CDI. Retro Game Brew was in 18 months, the cart will self-destruct. It's true. It was pretty much like that. But okay, so moving up this interesting history here that I pre-recorded is, and I think someone mentioned, one of the most successful formats out of the early formats is the introduction of Betamax. And Betamax is very popular. It actually was a format that was actually considered to be an official accepted format. And remember, this is very comparable to like how Blu-ray went up against HD DVD, and they were trying to figure out what's going to be the new format for high definition video. So at this time we had Betamax, and then as soon after Betamax came out, the VHS was finally created. And the first VCR to use VHS was the Victor HR 3300, and was introduced by the president of JVC in 1976. So this is a good timeline. So now you had Betamax, and then the VHS finally is released. And obviously we know the VHS. And then that created, like I said, you had the Blu-ray versus HD DVD. Back then you had the Betamax versus VHS. Who's going to win the format war? So obviously moving forward, VHS wins in the end because it's cheaper and the tapes are cheaper than Betamax. And in the end, VHS beats Betamax. But it's really interesting that there was a war between formats as far back as the 70s. Al, hey Al, good to see you too, by the way. VHS, a beautiful staple in time when it comes to physical media. Absolutely, and this is the history of it. Before the VHS could be something, Betamax had to lose to VHS in a format war, very similar to Blu-ray versus HD DVD. So now we've created the technology, right? We've gotten to a point where VHS is now the winning way to record, buy domestic recording software for your home so you can record live footage, whatnot, yada, yada, yada. But what was the first rental? Like, when did we start renting stuff? And that's where consumers came in and they're like, how do I expand upon my live viewing of TV? How do I rent something like a movie? You could record live TV at home on your really expensive VCR with a VHS or Betamax, actually. But it wasn't until this corporation called Magnetic Video Corporation was established by Andre Blay, an American film producer in 1968. He became the first corporation to release theatric motion picture onto Betamax and VHS video cassette tapes for a consumer market. So this is, as far back as I can remember, the first time someone was like, I want to repurpose movies and resell them to a consumer market. Remember, at this time, people did not do this. This was not something that existed. Retro Game Brew says, my parents worked at Kodak, who were trying to get into the VHS market in the mid-late 80s. It didn't take off, so they were giving away free tapes to employees. As a result, we had a huge library of VHS tapes recorded off HBO. I was a cinephile and a young age, and as a result, that's an awesome story, Game Brews. That's awesome. And just to let everyone know, Betamax can only record up to an hour, where VHS can record up to a little bit over 2 hours. So obviously with Betamax, you couldn't really watch a movie. So that's another reason why the VHS market kind of took over. Now, one of the first ever places you could actually go was something called the Video Club of America. Now, hold your horses. Guess how much it was to rent a movie off of this. If you wanted to rent a Betamax or a VHS off of the Video Club America, which was a kind of like a mail order system, which is really crazy to think about. There was no physical store yet. You would actually call this place and they would send you something, but it was $100 to rent a movie. $100 to rent a movie from these people. That's crazy, but it doesn't surprise me because when you come out with early technology, things are pricey. And if you wanted to rent a movie and watch it at home, it was $100. Biff, there's a whole history on the porn industry. I didn't really touch on the porn industry in this one, but you are correct. You are absolutely correct. Now, this is the fun part. When did we start opening brick and mortar stores? When did we start opening a brick and mortar Blockbuster type of store where a human could walk into a store and actually buy rented movies and stuff like that? Well, the first rental store ever was called Video Station. It was the first professionally managed video rental store, and it was opened by George Atkinson in 1977 in, of course, my home city of Los Angeles. So the first rental store ever was called Video Station. And once that guy decided, and George Atkinson was really smart, he's like, I want to figure out how do I get licensed to sell repurposed movies that are already been in the theater to consumers at home. So it wasn't Blockbuster, it wasn't West Coast Video that started this whole thing. It was actually a guy named George, and he started what's called Video Station. Al says, this makes me think back to an animated series cartoon on Cartoon Network called Regular Show that ran from 2009 to 2017. There was an episode there where some of the characters were going through the history of video formats throughout the past up to modern times, and the video formats turned into robots and fought each other to prove who was far superior, and it was called the Format Wars. Amazing episode. Love that. That sounds awesome. Cloud says, just a Switch OLED for a movie. Biff says Laserdisc must not have handled with sticky fingers. So we're at a point where there's a consumer video rental store for the first time. I love this photo. It's a really good example of like what a video store might have looked like back in the day. I love this photo. And there was a time when, he opened his first store, then other businesses started copycatting and opening their own mom and pop video rental stores and so forth, so on. Video rental stores become a part of society because one guy named George was smart enough to say, let's sell these things to the consumer market in person at a brick and mortar. Really cool fun fact there. I really like finding out about that stuff. Then commercial nationwide chains start opening up. This is an old commercial of West Coast Video in 1987. So you have West Coast Video, and then obviously Blockbuster shows up, and they're one of the first. And you have all these mom and pop video stores, but commercial companies and conglomerates are starting to invest into movie renting, and the rest is history. We have literally corporations renting movies across the country and the world, and video movie renting is born, and it's a part of our everyday life. It's something that we do, and humanity accepts it. And really, in the 80s into the 90s, it's just a normal part of life. You go to the movies to rent. You want to watch movies at home, you go and rent them. And yes, as No Fear says, you want to be kind and rewind as well. But that is really a brief history from the format starting to how do we get from new formats into a store. And it makes sense. It followed, a course, and a guy was smart enough to say, let's sell this in person. So you have Blockbuster, yada, yada, yada. We have all these cool shots, and I pulled up a bunch of cool videos of what it was like, going into a store, renting a movie. You had all the movies up on display, and behind each box would be the rental case. And that meant that you could rent it. If the rental case wasn't behind the box, then you were out. And sometimes new releases on a Friday night would be completely sold out. And you'd always walk up to the register and say, hey, did anyone return, this movie? And they'd always be like, I could check. And I always remember that every time they checked, they would never have it anyway. And then you'd have to wait till you maybe returned to your other movies. But if the movie you wanted wasn't there, you would have to kind of find what's the secondary movie you would go after, and what's the third, even if you can't find the two movies you want. So it was very much the style of renting and how we went about it. Al says, what are your thoughts on the video nasties era? I'm not talking about sexual explicit content. I'm talking about the obscure films that most big rental stores wouldn't take, only mom and pop shops. I mean, I don't have much of a take on that. It's just those were independent. Those were things that weren't being sold at Blockbusters and stuff. I think it goes to show you, like, there was an independent market, and I think that people still wanted to find these weird, obscure movies. So I thought it was really cool that you would find them in mom and pop shops, not at a Blockbuster or West Coast Video. No Fear says, pay to play Plex rentals coming to chicken soon. So yeah, this is cool video. I mean, you're really, really nostalgic here. I think I saw that movie, Leap of Faith, Hero. Look at all these VHS. Moving right along, I got some more videos that I found of just like, people renting movies, coming into a store. I mean, this was nostalgic. This was nice choice, by the way. Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. This was so nostalgic. Like, going into a movie place. Like, I remember my dad, God rest his soul, was a huge fan of movies, and we would always go. He would always take us on a Friday night, and we'd pick like 3 movies. Sometimes if he was in a good mood, he'd get us 4 movies. And me and my brother we'd always pick one movie for our family to watch. Then there would be like, my brother would pick a movie, I would pick a movie, and then my dad would pick a movie. But we always had the one main movie that we would pick. But this guy's throwing up all the great ones. Look at this original Batman. There's some good movies that he's showing here. So yeah. Now, we got video movie rentals. Let's quickly switch gears into what we loved, is renting video games. How did it start that we started renting video games at a store? And Blockbuster, West Coast Videos, and a lot of places, they said, you know what? I want to rent video games on top of movies because people like playing video games. Why can't we rent video games? So the history of video game rentals started, and they started renting video games. But what's really crazy about this whole experience with renting video games, and many of you might not know this, Nintendo hated it. Nintendo could not stand that their video games were being rented outside of purchasing. They didn't agree with it. They thought it was wrong. They did not want people buying their games as rentals. They wanted people to buy the games and own the games. So the fact that people were buying the games and then reselling them as rentals or renting them was a no-no for Nintendo. And I don't know if a lot of people know this, and this is something that I discovered. Nintendo tried to sue Blockbuster for renting their games, and they lost. because actually there was an act put into effect called the Computer Software Rental Amendments Act of 1990. And what's interesting is it protected computer software from being rented in stores, but it did not include video games. And Nintendo tried to have them amend this act to include video games, but they said no, because someone had the right to buy a game just because they were renting it didn't count as copyright infringement. And they didn't agree with Nintendo. So Nintendo lost that original fight against video game rentals. So Nintendo is still pissed off, and they're like, how do we stop this? How do we stop this? So there was another act called the Computer Software Copyright Act that came into effect as well. And this was another one that was trying to bend the doctrine of allowing people to rent computer games. And again, video games were not a part of this. You could still rent video games legally. It was completely legal to rent video games. So Nintendo was like, how do we stop this? And they found something out. And this is really fascinating. This is so fascinating. They end up suing Blockbuster for copying instruction manuals as copyright infringement, meaning when Blockbuster would rent Nintendo games, they would include instruction manuals with the games, and usually people would either not return the manuals or they would get stolen. So Blockbuster started photocopying the instruction manuals, and that opened up a loophole for Nintendo to say, you can't copy our instruction manuals. We're not going to let you rent video games if you're copying our instruction manuals. So in the end, Nintendo won that. They won the fight, but in the end, Nintendo still lost the battle against allowing their games to be rented, because they even stopped Blockbuster from purchasing wholesale directly from them. But Blockbuster employees would just go to the local video game store and buy a stack of the games they wanted to rent and come back and repurpose them as rental games. So really interesting that Nintendo was absolutely fighting this. Al says, No Fear says, Nintendo has always been a fly in the ornament. It's a shame that they do what they do to creators. And yeah, you could see. So I think here the Game Astoria picked up a video. So where you could, I remember the photo here. They are the photocopied like versions. So Nintendo was just figuring it out. Al says, one thing that feels like most don't remember anymore is when Schnucks grocery stores had a rental section for movies, and especially video games. I still remember one distant memory, a moment going to one, and it's how I watched Gremlins for the first time and played House of the Dead 3 for the first time. They rented movies at the supermarket, CVS, everywhere. But I thought it was fascinating that Nintendo was really fighting against it. But in the end, they didn't lose. And here's the really funny thing, is that Sega took advantage of this. Sega said, okay, Nintendo wants to sue Blockbuster. Why don't we work with Blockbuster? So that's why Sega ended up working with Blockbuster. They did like the Blockbuster Championships in 1993 and 94. They did a lot of commercials with Sega. And then eventually Nintendo turned around and finally said, all right, we'll do stuff with you. And, eventually Nintendo did like Pokemon Snap stations at Blockbuster, and it became just a normal thing to do. But I thought it was really interesting that Sega didn't, instead of fighting against this whole rental thing, they said, let's collaborate. So they made a really smart move, Sega, and they said, let's collaborate with Blockbuster while Nintendo is trying to fight this whole thing. So really cool that video game. Hell, if Nintendo would have won, there might have been a world where we weren't allowed to rent video games. So yes, as No Fear says, Nintendo always likes to get kind of like, when a new thing happens and it affects their sales, then they're going to be all over it. But I thought that was really funny that Nintendo eventually figured out some loophole to try to get them in trouble, and that was by them photocopying their instruction manuals. But that's pretty much how we got to video game rentals. And the sad part, obviously, and this goes with technology, and we were talking about this with Stadia, even though people, don't agree with it, there might be eventually this type of technology might take over, because, eventually we went into the streaming market and people said, I'll never stream stuff I'm just going to keep renting, but that ended up to die because people stream and, instant gratification with movies and TV shows. It's unbelievable. And over time, you could see here on this map, just watching blockbusters deteriorate and disappear from the world. Just year after year, the more and more technology advances and makes it easier for people to, rent video games or rent movies and stuff like that, the actual brick and mortar store disappears. And even by 2014, you're down to just a few handful of shops across the country. Obviously, there's one left in Oregon, and it's kind of like a nostalgic thing. It's not like they're, good. And thank you so much for the follow, Glim. Oh, and hey, good to see you. But yeah, by the end of everything, that was it. That look at this. The fact that you stopped going to rental stores was dying. I remember there was a Blockbuster here in LA. And hey, Ray, good to see you. Welcome. Thanks for coming to the cafe, by the way. Happy to have you here on a Saturday morning. We're talking about the history of renting movies and video games. And we've gotten to the part of that story where those kind of disappeared and the end of video game stores was over. So it's a sad occurrence, but obviously, today it's just normal for us to turn on our streaming service. And I remember when it was just one streaming service, and then it was two, and now it's three, and now I have 8 different bills being pulled out of my account every month of all these streaming services, and the act of going in to the video store is gone, and it has been. The only time I feel that rush of emotion of going to buy physical media is when I go my retro gaming shopping and I go into retro gaming stores. I feel the nostalgic, and obviously VHS tapes are becoming collectible now. There's actually a VHS store up the street, like treating it like a retro gaming store. Instead, they're just selling VHS tapes. It blows my mind that VHS is even considered a collectible right now, but it doesn't blow my mind completely. Lucky I still have some retro game shops at the malls, but they're very few and far between. We're not talking about retro game stores, Glim. We're talking about rental stores. We're talking about like where you would rent movies and video games and stuff like that. But yeah, it was a sad, sad day for Blockbuster here. So I always, on my Twitter, I always put relevant question, and I asked the world, I said, what are your memories of renting video games back in the day? And I'll read some comments here. So Soul says, I've rented a lot of PS1 games I didn't know at the time, like G-Police or Colony Wars. Funnily, I often ended up buying those games from them because they sold those titles pretty cheap. Kirk says, our small town local shop was called Video Mania, and there were some Radio Shack locations with a little video store in the back too. I remember having to leave a $1 deposit for the instruction manual when renting video games. I remember we'd originally rent an NES and games before we got one for ourselves, and that was what we occasionally did, and would always test games like Golf and Spy vs. Spy and Ghouls and Goblins. In the SNES era, I do remember we rented Stunt Race FX. Sweet T says, we rented Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Tournament Fighters. We were so late returning the game that the fee was $50. I got my $50 worth out of it, though. That's so funny. Oh, you're good. You're good. That's just the topic today. And then Cloud says, I brought all my Guitar Hero games off of liquidating rental stores. Acid said, there's a great place in my hometown of Tucson, Arizona, called Casa Video. They have tons of VHS and DVDs to rent, and you can have a beer and popcorn while you browse. That's pretty good. Let me read some more topics here. Always awesome to get out of school and pick up 1 or 2 games for the weekend, especially Blockbuster, to get snacks too. But feeling in a world I miss that I, especially after a long week of school, would be now better after work. I'll read a couple more here. Top Gun and the NES system is the only time I had in my house. I always played it, and we rented it, and I got a Game Boy and had Atari at home as well. The Conundrum says, trying to figure out if there was any way to finish the game before the return date, given we had chores, homework, etc. going on. Bad Child says, local grocery store had a better selection than Blockbuster, and the rentals were only $1 per day. Never got good at most of the games because limited time, but got to sample a ton. Rob says, I'll read the last one here. We didn't have Blockbuster or Hollywood Video where I grew up. We had the mom and pop ones, but they were cool because my cousins and I would scrape $5 to rent a game for 5 days and play nonstop over the weekend. And yeah, if you have any memories of renting games as well, throw them in chat because I remember renting video games. I mean, obviously renting movies was like a huge thing. I loved it. But renting video games was also super nostalgic. I'll read one more. My most common repeat rentals were Dynamite Heady and Sonic 3. I own Sonic and Knuckles, but not regular Sonic 3. Was always a bonus when I found my save was still intact. That's awesome. And yeah, wow. We've gone through almost an hour today, everyone. I'm like, it's been nonstop. I hope you feel like we have given you just like a little brief touch of like not only the nostalgia of renting video games, but the nostalgia of renting movies, video games, and how it started, how you even got to renting movies and stuff like that. It's just crazy that it's not really a thing anymore, yet now people are collecting VHS tapes and stuff like that. All right. Well, before we go, because you know the show is only an hour, and by the way, I got a bunch of stuff to do today, but I am so stoked that we are going to do a giveaway. Today, I'm giving away Greedfall, and we're going to be doing something very, very interesting. We're going to be playing a game that I've been working on with some friends, and we actually developed called basically, and here, I'm going to pull this up. Give me a second. So, if you could do me a favor, everyone in chat, we're going to do a giveaway of Greedfall, but to win, it's going to be the last man standing. And we're going to be playing a game that I am working on, and we are going to be releasing for streamers in the end of February called Muffin Tour Legacy. I'm going to play the cartoon. We don't have music yet. We're still working things out. This is a story about a baker, and she's fighting the evil Bear Claw King. It's a whole thing. It's a whole story. We're trying to get this side-scrolling adventure made. So because we don't have the funding yet, we created an API engagement game for Twitch streamers using the characters from the game that we are trying to get funded. This is a real thing that I've been working on the side, and today we're going to play a giveaway game. A part of it, it's an in-between game I like to call. So basically what you're going to do is !join in chat, and we are going to play Muffin Tour Legacy, Muffins on stream. And it's going to be a last manning thing. You're going to be a cupcake on stream, and you're going to get killed. But hold on, everyone. Let's start with the town. So yeah, as you see, I see, just do !join. You'll see here, you're a cupcake on the bottom here. And the whole idea is it's the last man standing. So please do !join in chat. I'll join too. And you become a little cupcake. So we got, look at that. We got a little DMC here. What's up, DMC? We got Genzo right there. We got me right there. So if you are still in my chat, all you have to do to join, and we are doing a giveaway. So the last man standing from this guy Donut taking you out is going to be your game. So we are giving away. Now, I know you did join, Cloud, but anyone that hasn't joined, please do. I see we have about 7. So please join if you haven't already, and we'll get this thing going. I'm really excited. All right, no fear is in. We got 8 people. So remember, we are giving away with Muffin Tour Legacy. We are going to be giving away Greedfall today as the giveaway game. It's a PC Steam code. Anyone else in chat, just put !join. It's going to be the last man standing. If you survive this, you get the game. So if we're ready, I'm going to start. But just so you know, everyone, oh, we got another one. Nice. Is Biff in? I don't know if Biff is in. If anyone else is in, lurking or whatever, feel free to jump in. We'd love to have you. If not, we're going to get this thing going. I'm going to give it 10 more seconds before, if you haven't joined, !join to win Greedfall. Other than that, let's get this thing going. Here we go. So let's see if the donut guy, who the donut guy is going to kill and who's going to survive. So he's going to shoot out a little donut hole here, and it's going to start coming at people. If you do, I forgot to tell you guys about the commands, but let's see who is going to be the last person standing. Okay, we got, Acid's dead. Oh, he's shooting another one. Okay, we got 3 left, 2 left. Al, I think you won. Al, no. It was Waywolf Knight won. First place, literally, just at the end there. Nice job. Waywolf, if you want, please DM me on Twitch or DM me on any social media so I can get you the code. Now we're going to do one more. Let's vote. Where do you guys want to go? So put exclamation point vote 1 for the forest, vote 2 for the town again, or vote 3 for the castle. I would say vote 3 for the castle. I would vote 3. So what we're going to do is another giveaway. And Wolf, if you are in chat, I will send you the code. But we are going to do one more fun round here. So let's go to the castle. This is our main bad guy, the Bear Claw King. He's a floating bear claw. That's the evil bad guy in this game. So do exclamation point join in chat and start joining this particular mode. This is our other. So exclamation point join in chat, everyone. There we go. We got no fear. Again, everyone's got to put an exclamation point join. Okay, great. Exclamation point join in chat, everyone. There you go. Nightbot. How did Nightbot do that? How did Nightbot know to join? That was weird. Thanks, Nightbot. Is everyone in? And by the way, I got to send the code to Waywolf, so I'll make sure I message you the code, my friend. All right, so for fun, let's play this. Let's just see if anyone else wants to join. This one's just for fun. I can't make it bigger right now. DMC, I apologize. I'm kind of stuck in this mode right now. So you're just going to have to deal with it. Actually, yeah, I can't do it right now. Okay, you guys ready? Here we go. Let's see who survives the bear claw. I think someone died. Oh, he just killed Cloud, I think. Oh, Al and No Fear survived the hit from Bear Claw. We still got 4 people left. Oh. All right, 3. No, we still got 4. He's mad. Oh, dead. DMC and No Fear are dead. Last are Al and Genzo. Oh, and let's see who won. It looks like Al won again. Nice job, Al. Nice job. And everyone, that is Muffin Tour Legacy, Muffins on Stream. I'll show the intro cartoon again. Well, we could do let's do one more. Let's do the forest. So this is Molly, our wonderful protagonist. So everyone do exclamation point join again. We'll play one more round here. Exclamation point join in chat. Exclamation point join in chat. Keep it going, guys. Last one. Yeah. This is the cake boss. So the whole idea, everyone, is that we built this API game just for fun, just for streamers to play in between games. It could be just like a giveaway game. It could be just a game that you're playing in the background. And we're looking to get funding because we want to turn this into a side-scrolling platformer. So I'm really excited about it, and we've been working hard on it. So let's have Molly kill you guys. She's going to jump on everyone. So let's see who's the last person standing. She's just going to jump on you until you die. Oh, sorry, Nightbot. You don't count anyway. Al's out, finally. He won 2 in a row. No Fear survived that one. Genzo survived that one. Oh, nice, Genzo. No Fear's dead. Oh, Cloud Breather and Genzo. Oh, it looks like Cloud Breather won. Nice job, Cloud Breather. Thank you all so much for playing Muffin Tour Legacy, Muffins on Stream. I loved it. Thank you so much for trying that out with me, everyone. Really excited that we were able to, let's recap. We talked about a whole bunch of stuff, obviously with the main topic being the history and renting of video games. So I really had a great time today. And just remember, I want to thank everyone on VOD for checking out the show, everyone at the live, because obviously if you're here for the live stream, you get to hang out with me. So I want to thank everyone in chat that took their time to spend with me today. I had a great time. And obviously we are here every Saturday morning, unless I'm not. All right, everyone. Well, until next time, don't forget, we only get one shot at this, so you might as well be nice to people. I'm Andy. Love Retro BTW across socials. You could check out me as Cafe BTW on TikTok and YouTube with our VODs of the episodes. Until next time, we'll see you on Cafe BTW, a gaming morning podcast. See everyone next time.